This is a story and storytelling commentary on Halo CE, Part 1. Gameplay is done on normal with no skulls. This is not intended to be a complete walkthrough or guide. I am making this out of personal interest rather than my expertise, and I want to highlight ways this game tells its story, and on some occasions mention how a rumored remake can take the original and reimagine it. And let's be honest, Halo CE is old and limited by its technology, so we can make a general statement here at the beginning so as to avoid being repetitive that basically everything needs a remake. I've split this commentary into multiple videos because I do not want to make a one singular long video. This one is going to cover the first 3 levels, which I think comprise the first act of the game. Halo uses visual storytelling very well. The Pillar of Autumn opens with a very Star Wars-esque opening shot of the ring and the Pillar of Autumn. We zoom by the ship's name before we are dropped into a dialogue between Keyes and Cortana.
Cortana, all I need to know is did we lose them?
I think we both know the answer to that.
Keyes is shown to be standing alone, yet he talks to Cortana as if she's there. It's only after the end of their exchange do we see her pop up, showing herself to be an AI. This reveals her after the action, which is a pretty fun technique. Also note how when Cortana says she's isolated approach signatures for multiple CCS battle groups, Keyes closes his eyes and takes in the gravity of the situation. And I think the greatest achievement is that their dialogue does not exposit the player,
Well, that's it then.
yet it tells so much of what we need to know with so little, and it maintains a cinematic feel.
Everyone, sir?
Everyone. And Cortana. Let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
I've already begun.
Attention, all combat personnel. Please report to your action station.
The panning shot of the Marines and their equipment shows us what vehicles we will be using to fight in the game. It also introduces us to the Marines proper, with Sergeant Johnson and his platoon. They actually play a fairly major role in the first act as secondary characters. We will rescue them in level 2, and we will use them to assault the Covenant ship in level 3. These Marines are likely the ones who are consumed by the Flood later in the game. It would be good in a rumored remake to give these Marines more individual characterization, so that when they have screen time we can better understand who Mendoza and Bizenti and Jenkins are.
All you greenhorns who wanted to see Covenant up close, this is gonna be your lucky day.
Only after the major characters like Keyes, Cortana, Johnson, and his Marines are shown is the Master Chief revealed. His placement as the last character to be introduced gives a subtle importance to him. Halo also uses diegetic storytelling throughout this game, to various levels of success, and the tutorial that follows Chief's waking up is one of those famous moments. It tells the player the mechanics that they need to know, while also being an in-universe routine that the Chief goes through when he wakes up from cryosleep. Though, that's only really in this game and not in any of the sequels. But one thing that can be overlooked is that it introduces the Covenant in another Star Wars-esque scene. Just as the stormtroopers break into the ship and start shooting, so too does the Elite break the door and start shooting as well, and he pressures us to run away without any weapons. But this run to the bridge, nevertheless, is an often overlooked part of the game. I think its closest comparison would be Dead Space's run from the Necromorph prior to getting the Plasma Cutter. The run itself shows us the hectic battle between humanity and the Covenant without using exposition. We see humanity is losing and they're falling back. We see them dying and struggle to survive. We see them wounded and broken, and they're forming their last defensive lines. They can barely survive only by sealing the bulkheads. I think it is a section of the game that desperately needs a glow up. The scripted scenes are janky and dated, but you can kind of see the idea they were going for.
I appreciate your concern, Cortana, but it's not up to me. The protocol is clear. Destruction or capture of a shipboard AI is absolutely unacceptable, and that means you're leaving ship.
The dialogue between Keyes, Chief, and Cortana give us our third Star Wars-esque part for this first mission. Just as Leia Organa gives R2-D2 a message for Obi-Wan Kenobi, so does Keyes give Cortana to Chief. And like R2-D2, the Chief's goal is to find an escape pod and leave the ship while it is being attacked. This is really our goal for the level. So it is fascinating. Chief and Cortana had previously tested their symbiotic relationship on Reach, and that was really their first moment working together. They may have been deployed into defensive Reach,
Excellent work.
but this moment, right here, right now, is when they work together for an extended period of time. This is not the way that humanity has worked in the past. This is a glimpse of how the future of their combat is going to occur. It is a Spartan AI deployment on a live battlefield.
Good luck, Master Chief.
Keyes gives us a pistol. Our first combat occurs at the doors to the bridge. The Covenant have breached humanity's last line of defense and are on the cusp of winning this fight. This is actually a very bleak and dark moment for the game, and it is into this bleakness that we as the Master Chief enter the battle. And that characterizes our entire actions for this level and this game and this trilogy. We do not simply fight the Covenant. We take a battered human military, throw it on our backs, and carry them to victory. If you notice, most of our combat engagements in this level already have the Marines fighting the Covenant. We are the cavalry who storm in and turn the tide of battle wherever we go. Halo's most important storytelling tool is that it uses combat encounters and scripted events as story vignettes. The game tries to avoid doing two things. One, taking control away from the player, and two, having the scripted event occur out of reach. It doesn't happen in another room, it doesn't happen behind glass or a locked door. It's right there with us, and it forces us to act. The first example is how the Covenant use the airlocks to attach their boarding craft. They make the Marines explode, and then we have to fight them. It tells us how the Covenant enters the airlock, but it also gives so much characterization to that as well. And yet, Halo shows itself capable of having quieter moments, such as when we round a corner and see the lifeboats leaving the ship. We then go through the access corridors. This is not simply a game of non-stop action, but it has moments of its own ambience as well. This first level gives a lull in the action before it ramps up to a final climactic gauntlet of fights at the end.
Warning, blast doors closing.
Cortana speaks only sparsely in this first mission, and her tutorials on a normal difficulty level don't necessarily break the diegetic method that Halo has used up until this point. The way she talks to the Chief could be an indication of their relatively new partnership. She tells us information we already know or can see for ourselves, especially battle information. So here's a question: does that kind of dialogue actually diminish as the game progresses? Is there a subtle growth in her trust in the Chief, reflected by her dialogue to him? I don't know, but it might be a nice subtle detail to change in a remake to show the growing trust between Chief and Cortana throughout the first game, by telling us, or rather showing us here at the beginning, how much there is a kind of step and go between them, and how that grows into a mutual trust by the end of the game. Also, as a side note, if you notice in the opening cutscene, Cortana is the one who's giving the Marines commands. But after she is pulled out from the ship, we actually hear over the intercoms that it is Keyes who is giving commands. It's a nice touch and a nice characterization for Keyes as a commander, but it's often overlooked. The final scene of this mission has Chief saving a Marine, only for him to die when the lifeboat crashes on the ring. I don't think this is an entirely meaningless scene. I think it reinforces some of the core ideas or themes of the story, our inability to save everyone, our struggle to survive. The Master Chief is a hero. He's also a sole survivor. He can turn the tide of battle, but humanity is still facing an unwinnable battle. And often, Chief's effort to save people are done in vain. This is only the beginning of the loss the Chief will experience over the course of this game, and this trilogy. But as the cutscenes that end this level, and begin the next one, show us, there's no time for Chief to rest and process this loss. The struggle to survive takes precedent over grief. Let's delay our conversation about the Master Chief's story, however, till the next level. For now we can notice that in level 2, it really showcases Cortana more so than anyone else. But the way it does so presents a storytelling challenge. Ask yourself this question: how does Cortana impact the story? Story is often about actions and characters, but as an AI construct in the Master Chief's suit, her actions are limited. She does act, to be clear. She spies on the Covenant's communication. She organizes our tactics and next steps in our strategic planning. She's the nexus for human communication and survival, and she interfaces with Forerunner technology. But how is that displayed in the game? Well, mainly through dialogue without visual cues. Now there are times when the game tells us that, hey, this is a dialogue moment, such as a cutscene or when Johnson and his crew in this level come up to us and speak face to face. But much of Cortana's dialogue, and this also applies to Guilty Spark later on, is a simple overlay of their dialogue over regular gameplay and combat, without any strong indication that says, hey, this is important dialogue happening. So what can happen is that we can ignore it, or it gets cut off completely because we are driving or fighting or navigating the play space. And I think Halo CE struggles to integrate Cortana's dialogue into the game in such a way that emphasizes her actions. In this level, she actually does quite a bit, but it is all easy to miss. In fact, she's the one who drives the plot. She organizes the Marines, she locates Captain Keyes, and she's the one who plans the attack on the Truth and Reconciliation to rescue him. Again, this is her level. But it also shows that Cortana and Chief are synergized together. They are not really standalone characters when they are integrated, because they work so well. For instance, Chief doesn't have to speak because Cortana is the mouthpiece. And we can often feel the immediacy of Cortana's presence, just like as if she's standing alongside of us, because of how close her audio work is. Perhaps it's best to say that the synthesis of Chief and Cortana are the driving actor for this game. So when they get split up later, does that give them a chance for further individual characterization as independent actors? For instance, is the Chief using Cortana to suppress his own grief? Maybe the game does a good job at that, maybe it doesn't.
Ready to roll! Good to see you, sir. I thought we were the only ones who made it.
We meet Johnson and his crew again as the first Marines on the ring. We saw them in the opening cutscene, and I think, again, this is another instance where we could give them a lot more individual characterization. There were a limited amount of Marine models due to their technology, and a remake would make that more clear. This area is also another instance where a remake would be great, because the dropships that come in are really janky due to the technology, and it really bogs down the pacing of the level. We also get introduced to Foehammer here, and that completes our introduction to the main Marine cast, but we also see lifeboats coming in. Their descent gives this mission its main goal, to rescue them. But here's a question. In the previous mission, we boarded one of the last, if not the last, lifeboats on the Pillar of Autumn. How did we get to the ring before these ones, yet after Johnson and his Marines? I think the answer is this. The Pillar of Autumn moves faster than the lifeboats. The ones that ejected earlier in the fight were further away from the ring, and thus took longer to reach it. But when we left the Autumn, the ship had gone much closer to the ring because it moved faster. And so when we left, we actually arrived earlier. So the last lifeboats to leave got to the ring sooner than the first lifeboats that ejected. Now coming back, this level is not filler, really. We use the Marines who we rescue to assault the Covenant ship in the next level. This is far more of a setup for the climax of level 3. And there's a direct relationship between the actions of this one and the next one, so nothing here is really wasted. It is so interesting that we see and traverse the ring without really learning about it. It is a mysterious thing, a mysterious setting. But our first-hand experience doesn't increase our understanding of the ring. This mission doesn't tell us what the ring is, it shows it to us. It lets us live with the mystery for this one and most of the next one. This means that we have a long runway to build up our expectations for the ring, so that when we get our twist later, we can appreciate it. And one penultimate idea. Where do the Covenant forces in this level come from? Well, they come from dropships. Well, where do the dropships come from? Probably from the Truth and Reconciliation. Throughout the rest of this level, we are simply rescuing Marines, and that's not super interesting storytelling-wise. So let's reflect on something that I think is really interesting. The YouTuber Narrative Arcade made a video about adapting Halo. Now, I'm not replying or responding to him, but I do want to reflect on his idea of how you integrate story into gameplay instead of just showing it. Because I don't think he tackles a really interesting thing that you can do in this level. You can kill the Marines in this level instead of saving them. It makes the level go by faster, and you are playing the game when you do so. But you are no longer playing the story. Having play as a component of storytelling invites us to wonder about the role of the player in telling that story. Because we can perform the story, and we can also ignore it. And this I don't mean by skipping the cutscenes, but by acting in ways contrary to the character who we control. And with this in mind, I think video games collapse the relationship between the performer and the audience into one, the player. You play as the chief, whether as his canonical events or not, but you are also the audience being entertained by your own performance of the chief. And I think this means that video games are similar to theatrical performances, whether like John Synge's The Playboy of the Western World, or an opera like Francis Poulenc's Dialogue de Carmelite. In these, the script and story are written out beforehand, and they are constant, but the actors change. Each play or opera is performed differently depending on the cast who are performing it. Have 3 separate casts, and the play or opera will feel like 3 separate events. A theatrical piece is played, in a way that is very similar to how a game is played. Game script and story are pre-existent, but we come in and do the actions of the main character. We are the actor of the action, in the same way an actor performs the action of their character in the play. However, we are also at the same time actor and audience. Our enjoyment of the story is owed to our involvement in performing it correctly. Now, an interesting side note is that this relationship fundamentally changes when we stream a game online. When we present our gameplay to others, they become the audience, and we are solely the actor. Very fascinating stuff. No scene in a story should operate independently. Everything should work together as a team. Setup and payoff work together as a tandem. But not every part of the story carries an equal load. So as a layperson, it seems to me that the setup of a story has to put in a lot more work so that the climax can do less. The setup creates the story points, and the climax connects them. So it's not to say that the climax of a story doesn't have story. Rather, the build up and the payoff have this weird relationship with each other, where there is an imbalance of material of the story that makes it a unified whole. I say that because this mission is the climax of Act 1 of Halo CE. It combines aspects from the previous 2 missions and pays off what they set up. We are here to rescue keys with the Marines that we have gathered from level 2. Thus, this level is mostly action. However, since this level also ends Act 1, we also need something to transition into the second part of the game. Specifically, we know nothing about this ring that we are on. So Truth and Reconciliation has to escalate the story in some way as we head into Act 2. Now, all that being said, I think this level actually is brought down by its pacing, or rather its length. The amount of time we spend navigating a ship from entrance to get to keys really dampens the excitement of the combat considerably, because it just takes too much time and there's too much of it. And I think it's a level that would really benefit from being cut down to a more concise form, so that it really embodies that early climactic feel. This level is a good reminder that pacing is core to storytelling. A climax should feel climactic, and not outlive that feeling to become a slog. And I do think Truth and Reconciliation trends in that direction. Before we get to keys, let's talk briefly about Chief, and also Johnson. What is Chief's story during this game? Because at first glance, he doesn't seem to have one. But Halo CE starts as a direct sequel to The Fall of Reach, the novel. There, Chief loses most of his fellow Spartans, the closest thing to a family he has ever had. He was a leader, the Spartans' leader. He is now their last sole survivor, or at least he thinks so. That move from companionship and leadership to loneliness is the journey that he is undertaking in this game. Chief actually starts at a very low point. He's filled with grief, but he can't process it because survival takes priority. And that loneliness is there despite Cortana being in his head. He is alone, and he tries to cope with that. Consider this. Halo has a novelization called Halo the Flood. In it, we have moments where we peer into Chief's mind. He stops and he reflects and he reacts to his surroundings and events. But none of those thoughts are shown to us in-game. Frankly, I think it would make the game worse. But there's such a difference between our ability to understand the Chief in the novel and in the game. And I think it just comes down to games and novel have different strength when it comes to characterization, so we don't get to see a whole lot of Chief's inner turmoils in the game, but we kind of do in the book. When we look forward, Chief only really starts to process his grief in Halo 4, but really even after that, or at the end of that game. So why does he not do any of that through the trilogy? Well, I think the closest comparison here is to say the Chief is going through his own Black Swordsman arc in Halo's original trilogy. That term comes from a manga called Berserk. It's a very famous manga. Guts, its main character, suffers extreme loss, he loses everyone he cares about and who cared about him, and then he spends much of the time wandering the land, surviving everyday demonic encounters, and he can't process his grief because survival takes precedence. So while Chief isn't driven by revenge, the mechanic of survival to avoid grief is the common element there. And a reminder, the Covenant represent an existential threat, so do the Flood. So Chief doesn't have a lot of downtime during the trilogy. But what's interesting is that the end of the Black Swordsman arc has Guts encounter his cracks in the blade moment, where he as a protagonist is confronted by his past and current living situation, and is forced to process his grief and move forward, and that forward path leads him into a new family as a leader. For Chief, his cracks in the blade moment comes in Halo 4. In other words, the Master Chief's story arc spans multiple games. The downside is that no game in particular has a focused story arc for Chief. I think Bungie missed a really good opportunity of showing us Chief's loss in Halo Reach. They didn't focus on him, but they could have. They could have showed us his Spartans and the people he cared about die one by one, and then we could have a better understanding of how Chief is suppressing the loss of everyone close to him. Not just the Spartans, but Keyes and Johnson and Miranda, and in Halo 4 it's even Cortana. Everyone close to Chief dies, and I think the game could spend a bit more time showing how these affect him, and yet have him unable to process it because of the moment of survival. Now, a brief note on Johnson. I think Johnson mirrors Chief's journey. He is a leader among the Marines, the last Spartan 1 survivor, who suffers loss here on the ring. Everyone he knows dies, but he alone survives. And that helps him to progress to become a better leader, one who leads humanity for the rest of the trilogy. So I think it's the experience of loss and the sole survivor forges a leader for the next generation. And I think that's kind of what Chief's larger story is all about. The contrast between Truth and Reconciliation and the Pillar of Autumn, as ships and as levels, is a really good comparison and a really good side anecdote. A synecdote is a technique where you use one part to characterize a larger whole. So you use one ship to characterize an entire faction. And you can do this in reverse, of course, by using the entire faction to characterize a single individual. But here, the difference between their interior design and layouts can be used to show the characterization differences between humanity and the Covenant without giving any verbal explanation. It falls in line with Halo's visual storytelling. The colors, the decorative lighting, the structure of the hallways, the loading bays that open downwards into the grav lifts, its hangar bays, etc., can all be used to capture these differences between these two factions. Oddly enough, the use of interior design to capture culture is an argument that Jean Baudrillard uses in his philosophical work, System of Objects. That's a really fun read, but that's neither here nor there. This synecdotal comparison can also be extended to the music. If you listen to the music in this level and in the first level, those cues and differences are really fascinating. And I think this level actually has unique music that isn't used anywhere else.
One moment, sir. Accessing the Covenant battle.
Last thing for this video, I want to talk about Key's dialogue with Cortana here. I don't want to repeat what I've said in another video, but to repeat what I said in that other video, I love this part. This exposition is great. It really helps to characterize Keyes as someone who formulates a plan of success in the midst of a prison. But I think it's also important to have a scene like this because we are concluding Act 1 and we need something that brings us into Act 2. Keyes' dialogue, even the simplistic form that we have, provides us with the necessary information for that transition. Halo isn't just a giant ring, it's a weapon, and the Covenant are trying to find its control center to use it to wipe humanity out. That is an escalation that is great. Well, it's not great that they're going to wipe us out, but you know what I mean. Because we didn't know about the ring, this is also a first reveal about the function of the ring. So it gives us a bit more illumination to the setting. And while we don't know about the Covenant's full theological motivations yet, the threat of them using the ring is real because we've seen them attacking us so far. And I think this does a really decent job of escalating the stakes in the story and giving us a new objective to find the control room. But that's going to have to wait till next time.